Hello, and welcome back to the third episode of the Privett Park Legends podcast. Today, I'm joined by another Boro legend who made 680 appearances for the club from 1977 to 1996, which included winning the Hampshire League. Welcome, John Hawes. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Enjoying retirement and perhaps even enjoying the lockdown.
So, what have you been doing essentially to keep busy?
Well, I think I've been retired for 8 years now, so I think that helps you get into a routine. But I've we obviously miss a few things. We miss the swimming. I still play five-a-side once a week. Miss the grandchildren. But I've done a bit of running, which just about killed me because I thought my running days were over. But yeah, but it all helps. We do a lot of walking and basically outside as much as we can.
Yeah, and well, in terms of club news this week, I guess the big two things were Sam Roberts and George Barker both leaving the club. Sam Roberts has gone to Salisbury and George Barker to Moneyfields. What did you think of those two players leaving?
I think there's bound to be a change with a new manager in, and I particularly like what Tony Gill said the other week, that he wants to have a more local input of players, which I think is going to be very difficult. But I think it's inevitable that some players will come and go, and unfortunately, that's been the situation now for the past 2 or 3 years. Every time the manager changes, a whole influx of players come in, and I'm not particularly sure that's been good for the long-term future of the club. But it is difficult. As an aside, when I first came to Gosport in 1974, I think it was, 1972, there were 35 teams in the Gosport Saturday League and 35 teams in the Gosport Sunday League, and that was without the Mid-Solent League or anything like that. 1,500 players were registered to play football in Gosport over the weekend, and that's where the team came from, Gosport players, whereas now there's no Saturday League and the Sunday League is, putting it mildly, not very good. So it just shows, I think, how difficult it will be to bring back players into Gosport.
Do you think the Centre of Excellence idea will try and almost not be the same as that, but re-establish that old idea of having the two strong Sunday League and the Saturday Leagues in Gosport?
Yeah, well, it certainly won't do any damage, but and of course the other issue with that is that obviously Gosport are now playing at a higher level than when we came through, starting in the Hampshire League. There's quite a big step, isn't there?
Do you actually think maybe clubs like Gosport, along with Havant and other Fair and maybe other, do you think they need to do more in a sense to encourage local leagues like it on Sunday and Saturday in order to not increase, but to increase more players coming into those teams?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. It's difficult enough running Gosport Borough Football Club, and trying to do things like that. So, yeah. But again, things go in circles, don't they? And perhaps we've not had 2 or 3 very good years, but hopefully, in time, the club will come back.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, getting on back, starting your career, what is the first real footballing memory you have?
Oh, as I say, that goes back a long way. So I was born in Plymouth. I'm a Plymouthian. I'm still a big Argyle supporter. So the first thing I remember kicking a football about is my father was in the Royal Marines. He was a PTI, and out in Malta you didn't go to school in the afternoons because it's so hot. So Dad, as in charge of the PTIs, used to take me along to the gym, and I'd just kick a ball about all afternoon. And I suppose really that was the first thing I remember in respect to playing football at all.
What age were you out in Gibraltar then?
I think something like 4 to 6.5, something like that, I think. So, yeah. But my father played football and cricket, and it's just something, that's what I did as a kid. And again, when we were growing up then, because again, I'm going back to the 1960s, we didn't have game machines and stuff like that. It was, every time you got home, you just went down the park, kicked the ball about, played a game, and then went home, went to bed. The football and cricket really was what we did.
And so, what age did you start? Did you move to Gosport? What age was this at? Was it straight after Gibraltar, or did you go somewhere else?
No, we back to Plymouth. I moved to Gosport in '72. I joined the MOD, and they told me that I'd been successful at the interview, and I was going to move to Gosport to Centurion. And I thought, Christ, where the hell's Gosport? I've never heard of it. And yeah, so November '72. I arrived in Gosport.
So, just going back a bit before that, were you playing school teams a lot, or was it more local like youth teams separate from school?
No, I played. Well, again, we didn't have the big youth setups you get now. My father did run a team for a couple of years, but I was pretty lucky at the school I went to. We had some very good teachers who, again, very keen on football. One of them actually played for Argyle, and the other one took me to play men's football. I think I was about 16, and I started playing in men's football at a reasonable standard when I was 16. So, I've done all the Devon schools stuff and all that. So, again, that's all we did.
And so, who do you think was more important? Was it teachers, or was it your dad in really getting your love for football and thinking of it as something to go beyond not just childhood but into adulthood?
Well, I think it was just something I wouldn't say you're born to be a footballer, but I think you've either got the ability and the skill and the temperament, and it's just what you want to do. And certainly all I wanted to do as a youngster was play football, and nothing else really involved. And of course, watch Plymouth Argyle play.
Were there any?
Which is go on.
Were there any particular players that stood out for you, that Plymouth Argyle team? Were there any you really tried to emulate as a player?
But at that time, they were, again, we're going back 50 odd years, and teams at that level were more stable than nowadays. Players didn't have 1 year, 2 year contracts. They probably had 5 year contracts. But and you meet a lot of people. Colin Sullivan was a super player, and he played for Plymouth at the age of 16. And of course, subsequently, I played with him for Fareham Vets. But he was a good player. Barry Jones, they signed from Cardiff. Mike Bickle, who was a milkman and played for Plymouth. So it was, it was just local team, local support.
So you mentioned in '72, you went to you moved to Gosport essentially to try out for the reserves team. At that time, there were a lot of home players essentially from Gosport and Southampton Oakway. Did that feel a bit odd coming from Plymouth essentially, an outside area to these teams where they were all made up from essentially players that all grew up in the same area, knew the area, some even knew each other from a young age?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I got here, I started playing Centurion, had a team in the Saturday League.
Mm-hmm.
So I played for them for the rest of that season. And then the following season, I actually managed them because it was a naval establishment. There was people coming and going all the time. And then during that season, he was my best friend and best man, Norman Goff, took me up to the Wheatsheaf, and at the time they were, they were a very strong Sunday side, and he said, well, look, he can play a bit, blah blah blah.
Sorry,
and
John, the recording's gone a bit.
Books all playing for the Wheatsheaf, and sorry.
Sorry, the recording went a bit funny there. Sorry, can you just repeat that quickly, just because it went a bit cut out?
Okay. So I started playing for the Wheatsheaf in the Gosport Sunday League, who were, say, quite a strong side. And then I think at the end of the next season, 73-74, Tony Higman, who was managing then with Mick Slaymaker, came down, watched a couple of games at Privett, and asked if I'd be interested in joining Gosport. So I played a few games for the reserves at the end of that season, and that helped, I think, for the start of the following season. But as you say, it was a little bit difficult because, as you've said, players had been played for the school sides, and they were all Gosport players, all Gosport lads when I first joined. So, so at the end of that season, the following season, I played for the first team, and things then just clicked. I scored a few goals, and at the time I was quite a social person. So at the end of the day, it wasn't a problem.
So do you think having those couple of games at the end of the 72-73 season before you basically played for the full season as 73-74, do you think that helped essentially gel yourself into those players and that team?
Yeah.
If you hadn't had it, you would have been a lot more difficult.
I think it would have been a lot more difficult, but obviously, you get to know the characters and the personalities, and I think it was probably, very useful.
Mm-hmm. And so then you played a couple of games, and then you moved in 1975 to Alton Town. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Was that for the first team? Was that more reserves games?
No. It was at the end of that first season that I played. Tony Higman and Mick Slaymaker resigned, and Brian Mesher joined the club to manage the next season, and he brought some players in with him. So obviously I was a little, I won't say I was concerned, but I thought perhaps I wasn't going to get more first team games that year. But the thing that actually made my mind up is we played pre-season friendly, and Brian took one of the senior players, Ron Wilson. He was extreme. I don't know what built up to it, but he more or less threatened Ron. And Ron was one of the nicest, most gentle people you could wish to meet. And I thought, well, do I really want to play for him? And a few days later, Alton got in touch and at the time they played a senior league, which I thought was possibly a slightly better standard than Gosport at the time. So I moved to Alton for a couple of seasons. But, with hindsight, Brian was completely out of order, and I just thought, I'm not really sure I want to play for this guy.
Mm-hmm. And did you enjoy those 2 years, or did you live at Gosport actually at the time when you played for Alton, or did you move to Alton?
No, I've still lived in Gosport. But the first year I played for Alton, it was basically Portsmouth players, people like Lenny Phillips, Mickey G, Keith Ward, Barry Dyer, Malcolm White, Les McDonald, and a Portsmouth manager. So the first season was relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
And then second season, again, there was a change in management. And basically there was only a couple of us going up from Gosport. But one of them was Richard Reed, who later played for Gosport. And I used to go up with him. So, and I enjoyed those 2 seasons. And I think they did me good, actually. So, yeah.
And the Athenian League and the London League have to travel all the time to Alton and then up to London. Was that a bit of a challenge at some points, especially as living in Gosport?
Well, yeah, yes and no. Again, I used to, if I couldn't get a lift up, somebody from the club would pick me up from the railway station, and the away games really were also socially quite good. So no, I wouldn't say it was a problem at all. Wife might not say so, but
and also, do you think you said about the team being majority of it coming from Portsmouth and having a Portsmouth manager? Did you feel like when you came into Gosport, you had to get used to all these players knowing each other? Do you think having the same experience at Alton meant it was easier to deal with because you knew how to sort of interact with a group that mainly knew each other? You were coming into that group.
Yeah, no, and again, they were, they were very, very friendly, very good, and particularly people like Lenny Phillips and all were good as gold. So no, I've always found it quite easy to fit in, as it were. So yeah.
And so then, in 1977, you moved back to Gosport. Were there any major reasons why you decided to come back to Gosport?
Yes. Well, first of all, I got married in 76, so from that perspective, it was much more convenient. Secondly, Pete Edgar did make an effort, and he came out and spoke to me and all the rest of it. And it's always nice to be wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And thirdly, Gosport had won the league. That's the Hampshire League that season, that second season. It just seemed to be the right time to come back to the club.
Was it also you had Peter Edgar and Tony Brickwood there, both of them being former players? Do you feel more comfortable with them as manager because they knew what the club was about, they'd experienced it? Did you know them in any sense as well?
Yes. Obviously, I didn't know them particularly well at the time, but it was all, the club was about Gosport. The chairman was from Gosport, the committee was from Gosport.
Mm-hmm.
Tony and Pete had both played for the club lots of times, so it was it was a proper Gosport club.
Mm-hmm. And then, as you mentioned, you come into a side that already won the Hampshire League in '77, which was the first league title in 31 seasons. Did you feel the pressure of having to perform that you were coming into a league winning side and essentially taking over someone's position who had won the league before?
No, I didn't. I remember I was picked right from the start, and I, I, I wasn't. I was never what I call a proper number 9, because physically, I wasn't, big enough or strong enough. I was extremely thin, and I played in midfield till Christmas, and we had a pretty poor start that year, as I remember. After Christmas, they played me up front, and I just couldn't stop scoring goals. I think that was the season I ended up with about 33 goals after Christmas. So, no, I found it quite easy, to be honest. They're local lads, and they're, the Tony Mahoney's and people like that are great people, and it was all fairly easily. And, at the end of the day as well, it was more convenient playing for Gosport and, being in Gosport.
Do you think that's probably one of the biggest things that helps you as a player, having that convenience and comfort that you lived in Gosport, you were now playing with players you'd already played with in the reserves teams, and having that comfort of being confident in your surroundings helps you as a player?
Yeah, without a doubt, because for the next, we keep saying it was the best years of our lives. For the next X number of years, when we were winning and doing well and, going up the leagues, it was fantastic. People wanted to talk to you about football all the time, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. And people, for example, Tony Mahoney, I might not see for a couple of years or something, but as soon as I see him, it's like we met yesterday. And all you can run through the whole team: Gary Jurieff, Tony Stairs, Tony Milne, Roger Buckland. They're all Gosport through and through. So it certainly made it much better. And Tony Brickwood was quite an astute guy, and I think it's a bit like Tony. Tony would know whether some people need a bollocking or others need a well done sort of thing. Tony was very much like that. So no, I found it quite easy, and we enjoyed it. We enjoyed ourselves.
It's interesting you say all this about comfort. I think with the current team, you have a lot of ex-players who've come back. So Rory Williams, Mike Carter, Patterson, and many more. Do you think all those former players who used to play for the club, and then some also extra players that come from haven't, do you think all those players because they've known each other, do you think that will come to the aid of the team? All these players who've known each other, and now even the manager, being in Sean Gebb, do you think all these players together will help, with Boro's push for promotion, going up the non-leagues ladder?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the dressing room is like, or what the current attitudes are down there. So I think I'll give that one a miss, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. So the next thing is, of course, after the second successive league title for Gosport in '78, the club was elected to the Southern League. Was that quite a big moment for you, and the realisation, I could be going somewhere in terms of non-league football and the club as well?
Yeah, obviously it was a big thing at the time, and a big boost for the club and for the players. Obviously, it was something that continued to help us to grow, I think, as players and as a team and as a club. And again, I think we were virtually. I think we used to be paid tea money for those first couple of seasons, which is about £3 a game.
Yeah.
The money wasn't an issue. It was about playing with your mates in effect, and to play with your mates and to go to some places like Dartford and Wealdstone and Dover and Crawley and places like that and get results was just incredible. And really, it was an incredible achievement those next few seasons.
Mm-hmm. And so one particular, I guess, highlight, maybe not the end part, was in 78, the 78-79 season, was the FA Rather run for Gosport.
Yeah.
How disappointing was that the defeat in the quarterfinals to Almesbury in the replay?
It's the most disappointed I've ever been, because we were 3-1 up, and we completely outplayed them. We missed numerous chances, and then to actually lose the game. And I think we ended up with 9 men. Trevor Williams got sent off. We had 2 injuries, I think, and there was only 1 substitute in those days. Was absolutely awful, because we were the better team than Almesbury, without a doubt. And it was really disappointing.
Do you think that defeat had a little bit of an impact on your season, or were you able to brush yourselves off pretty quickly and keep going?
Yeah, we were, because the team's spirit was there. You know, all the lads were the type that get Tony Mahoney and people like that were extremely good at that. And I don't think it was losing the game was an issue at all, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And then, so during those first 4 seasons for Gosport in the Summer League, I think it's, if I get up statistic, I think it's something like, yeah, here we go. In the first 4 seasons in the Summer Football League, the team never finished outside the top 4. Do you think there was a point where you thought we could get promoted here, maybe even go even further as a club, or was it always you kept grounded?
Well, at one time I'm trying to think what season it was, but we weren't that far off, were we? We were playing the same league as Gosport were before the relegation started. Mm-hmm. But the problem was, and I think it's a similar problem to they've got now. Financially, the club has never been able to stand on its own with crowds, etc. And it's always been a struggle. And once people started, we were all growing up together, we grew up together, but then people started getting injury or whatever, then that was the beginning of the end as far as we were concerned. But we certainly had a very successful run during the 80s.
So in 1984, you left Gosport to go to Trowbridge. What were the reasons for, at the time, leaving Gosport?
Okay, yeah. The reason I moved to play for Trowbridge was that work-wise, I got transferred to Bath, and we lived in Trowbridge. Trowbridge had been relegated from what's now the National League the year before. So again, the fact that I could just walk down to the ground, and we had 2 young children, made it a no-brainer, to be honest. So I started playing for Trowbridge that season. But it wasn't a particularly well-run club, and obviously coming out of the National League, there was a lot of issues there. So around Debbie's father died on Boxing Day at Christmas. So Mum was in Gospel back on her own. I wasn't particularly happy at Trowbridge, and it just made common sense to come back and play for Gospel again.
Did you feel like, was it straight from the start you didn't feel comfortable at the club, or was it as the season progressed you started feeling that this is not as good as Gospel?
Yeah, as the season progressed, it just, I don't know, perhaps I've been at Gospel too long, but after I left, the grandstand was burnt down, and that was allegedly for insurance purposes. That to me just summed up really what was happening at the club. So I was more than happy to come back.
I mean, when talking previously to Tony Mahoney and Peter Mullis, both of them mentioned about how when they moved to other clubs or they played maybe a game or an odd game for another club, the one thing they felt they didn't have at the clubs they moved to compared to Gospel was that close team spirit, camaraderie. Did you think that was the biggest thing you felt you missed from Gospel?
Definitely the biggest bonus we had, the best advantage we had, it was that team spirit and commitment. And Tony Brickwood, I always made a big thing of, by that time we were getting a little bit of money, but everybody was paid the same. So there was no prima donnas, or there was no jealousy or envy or anything like that. And the players just, when we first went into the Southern League, for example, it was our whole life, really. We were all young players, and all of a sudden, the league was, I think, 46 teams. You were training Tuesday and Thursday, because if you didn't train, you didn't get picked. We'd be playing Saturdays. Some Tuesday nights we'd be travelling to Kings Lynn and things like that. And even in the first few years, we played in the Cup. So the only really it was a social life as well, because you train Tuesday, Thursday, Friday you don't go out. Saturday was the only time that you'd socialise, really. So it was a big thing for Gospel and for the players at the time. And Pete Edgar used to say, all we want you to do is enjoy yourself, and we did. It was fantastic. And then to go to somewhere like Trowbridge, where because they got relegated, the majority of the players are gone, it was very difficult, and I was pleased to come back to Gospel.
So, as well, when you came back in '85, was it during the time when they were about to be promoted, or had they already been promoted at the time?
I came back at Christmas, and that was the year we got promoted. And you've probably seen the cartoon thing, haven't you? Well, it's not a cartoon, the caricature of the promotion bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've seen that was that season. So, in fact, I think I've only played 16 games, and I got injured. But we got promoted again, back to where we were.
How was the atmosphere of the club different compared to when you'd left 6 months before, compared to then when you came back? Was it different, or was it because of
I don't think we seem to. Well, certainly, I think Tony and Peter brought in a few players, which definitely strengthened the side. So no, I don't think there was any difference, but I'll perhaps add a bit more to that in a minute, because I think I expect I know where you're going on this.
And then just whilst getting on to the just a bit ahead. So the team during that, the part where actually you, funny enough, had 16 wins in their last 19 matches.
Yeah, that was all down to me.
Yeah, there seems to be one common thing. You came back and that started happening.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And then in the final match, did you play this match against Salisbury where Gosport won 5-0?
I got injured 2 or 3 games to go. But I remember, obviously, I watched it, and then I think after the game I was serving behind the bar because it was absolutely chaotic.
Yeah, it was chaotic because there were. I've got the stat here. There was over 1,500 people at the game, so no wonder it was a bit chaotic.
There was a super atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that whole season helped really build your love for the club even more? That you'd been away for those 6 months, you realised, what you were missing, and then you come back, and then there was this whole run and good feel about the club that it was almost that slight dip from relegation was now over, and the team was winning again.
Yeah, I certainly enjoyed coming back, and it probably made me appreciate more what Tony and Pete Egger had done for the club, and it obviously it wasn't particularly easy because obviously Trowbridge to Gosport, and then if we were playing away, I remember once we played at Crawley, I'd have to drive up to Crawley and come back and then drive back to Trowbridge. So I wouldn't say it was ideal, but from a football perspective, it was great, and we were winning, and we got promoted, so it's fantastic.
And then so you spent another 2 years at Gosport, and then you moved to. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. Oh, you did.
Well, I did a bit of work before. I think then halfway through the next season, I was moved, again, work-wise, I was moved to Belgium.
Yeah.
So I think I played till Christmas and then moved to Belgium. But I did play a couple more games at Easter when we came home. And Tony was in contact with me, and I actually played a couple of games at Easter. So, but then obviously that was it for 2 or 3 years.
What's that movement of going to different clubs all the time to your job? Do you think that had maybe a little effect on your career? There wasn't, you maybe got a bit comfortable and established, and you were going. You were playing well, and then all of a sudden you were moved. Do you think that hampered you a bit as a player, or did that frustrate you?
The season that I moved to Belgium, I was having a fantastic season. The only thing is, as I keep saying to Tony Maloney, if I spent 3 years in Belgium and 2 years at Alton, I would have beaten his record of games played. But I think in some ways it does you good, because you do learn different things and different people, and particularly going to Belgium, it was like playing a different game over there. But so no, I've always enjoyed my football, except if we lost. So yeah.
So, as you mentioned, in 87 you moved to Belgium. Now, apologies if I absolutely mess up this pronunciation, but this is what I think it is. It's KFC Herentals, is that correct?
Yeah, Herentals. Yeah,
Herentals.
That's very good. Yeah, Herentals.
And how was it? You said it was slightly different in the Belgian league compared to the English league. How was it different? What were the exact differences?
Well, the biggest difference is the reason I started playing out there was that one of the guys already out there used to get the football news sent out to him, the Portsmouth Saturday football thing, and he'd lined me up for a club when we got there, so that was great, but I wasn't able to play for the first team until the following season because of, I don't know, registration rules or something. So again, I had that introduction to the club, and after, again, you soon learn to socialise and whatever. But the biggest difference when I did start playing for the first team was that playing up front. I was actually playing up front on my own again, which I won't say I particularly enjoy. But I'd be making runs and they'd be passing the ball. By the time it came up front, I'd made about 10 runs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a different game. They all played with a sweeper, all of them. It was a different game.
Did you prefer the style in Belgium or in England?
England.
Mm-hmm.
Much more passion, much more excitement. And, again, it's why the Premier League's so popular, isn't it, in overseas countries.
And then also, I wanted to ask, what was life like in Belgium? Because of course, you're going to a different country. Was it quite different? Did you feel that not much changed?
Sorry, did I feel?
Did you feel? So, what was life like in Belgium? Was it different to England, or did you not feel much change?
Well, it was. We were on a MOD base, and Herentals is just the other side of Antwerp. So, and we lived in service quarters. So, obviously things were different from a social point of view, and where we were living, and etc. But we loved it, and playing for the football team, the town football team, was incredible. The Belgian people, and again, this is going back, what was it now, I suppose, 35 years, were very pro-British because of what happened during the Second World War. And, playing for the football team, they were treated like royalty. Mm-hmm. It was fantastic. And, thoroughly enjoyed it. It gave us the opportunity to travel and do things that, with two young children, we probably wouldn't have been able to do.
Do you think playing for the football team also helped you, I guess, integrate into the area and help learn the language? Do you think if you didn't play football out there, it might have not been as easy?
If I hadn't played football out there, you'd find that the army guys, the civilians there were just quite a small number. Then their whole life can be constrained into the mess life and work and social and whatever. So it was a definite bonus. My wife and I, it's probably the best 3 years of our life, mm-hmm. to be honest, because as I said, we were treated like royalty. And there's no doubt playing football helped tremendously. I still can't speak much Flemish though, because it's a very difficult language to learn.
So during these 3 years, did you ever miss gospel, or were you enjoying life so much in Belgium, didn't really have those thoughts of, I wish I was playing gospel like you did when you were playing for Trowbridge? No. It was a one-off, and it was a wonderful experience, and it was a great 3 years, and we wouldn't swap it for anything. Mm-hmm. So then, in 1990, you came back to gospel. Was that again due to your job, or was that a family decision?
Job move. You're only able to do 3 years at a time abroad. Mm-hmm. Else I would have stayed out there longer.
Yeah, and then so of course quite a bit had changed at the club when you left, and then when you joined back. Did you feel the club a lot of so quite a few players retired during those, the golden period for gospel, essentially the likes of Tony Mahoney, I think would be the big one who had retired at the time. Do you think the club you went into at that point, did you feel as connected to it as the club you'd left?
It was completely, to be honest, I came back and so 1990, what was I there? About 36, 37. And I thought, I don't think I'll, it's probably about time I went back to Sunday League.
Yeah.
Which I did. But I went down to watch them play Corby. And Roger Buckland was managing at the time, who obviously I played with and I was a good mate with. And they lost 1-0 to 9. Corby were reduced to 9 men, and Gosport lost 1-0. And I looked at it, I thought I could still play here.
Yeah.
And Roger sort of obviously went in and had a drink afterwards, and Roger said, "Well, give it a go." So I started playing again, but it was a completely different club. There was players there on lots of money, which I think there's the trouble with spending lots of money is that you sometimes attract the wrong sort of player, and whereas we never had that problem and the atmosphere was great, I think sometimes you get the wrong sort of player there, and the atmosphere was different. And of course, we were losing all the time, or not all the time, but it felt like it.
And then, so of course, there was at the time then in 1992 the club was relegated to the Wessex League. Did you feel that was another real low point? The club you'd essentially loved and you pushed up all the way from the Hatch League all the way up to the nearly to the National League. Now was in the Wessex League. Was that quite frustrating as well, because you looked around and you didn't see those players?
Yes, because obviously I was involved with the club for a number of years and then carried on in different roles, and it was difficult, but basically, and again, it got to the point where the club financially was really struggling again, and obviously the whole sort of atmosphere or build-up is between the Wessex League and one off the National League is completely different.
And then, so did you? And then at the end of '92, did you decide? Was it a retirement, or did you just decide to leave?
Yeah, no, I decided to. I think that was when Roger Sherwood arrived.
Yeah, correct.
I believe, yeah, and I just thought again. By then, was I then 38? Wasn't I? I thought probably it is best if I retire. Although, funnily, and I started doing the youth team. Managing the youth team. Funnily enough, though, Roger did ring me up one night, and he was short players for a League Cup game or something, and I actually played half the game. On the Saturday, he rang me again and asked me to play, but my father was in hospital in Plymouth, so basically we were going down to Plymouth, but. But obviously I was still involved with the club, but not playing.
Was that something you always wanted to go into, coaching, or was it just you felt because you wanted to keep in football, you just felt at the time you retired, you don't want to leave, so you just go into that? Yeah,
I think when we'd come back from Belgium, both my boys in Belgium, they didn't want to be at all interested in football, although they'd come to the games and be treated like royalty. We got back from Belgium, and all of a sudden the two boys got interested and wanted to start playing. So I actually coached a boys' team with one of my boys in for 2 or 3 years after we came back from Belgium. No, actually 3 or 4 years before we came back from Belgium, until they got to the under 18 level, and then that was actually the same year that I took over the youth team. So I've been doing that. I wouldn't ever say I wasn't a brilliant coach in the world,
Yeah.
but certainly enjoyed particularly the youngsters.
Was that?
Yeah.
Well, some people, you know, when they're coaching their sons' youth team, find it a bit conflicting. Did you ever have that problem where you felt a bit conflicted that, you know, sometimes people may look at you, you know, favouring some? Was that ever a problem you had? Or?
No, it wasn't. No. Mm-hmm. Full stop.
So you were at the time, of course, running the gospel youth teams. Then in 1995, you, along with, if I'm right, Dave Pitt and Barry Cook, you started running the first team. How did that come about?
Well, I was doing the youth team, and Ian Hay, and you know, the club was really struggling financially, and I think Roger Sherwood had resigned, I think, because he'd been offered the Eastleigh job, if I remember rightly. And you know, the club were struggling. There was no money, and so I think Ian Hay thought, well, you know, let's try and get back to the gospel team as it was. And he asked me, and I said yes, but I was obviously I've not really managed at any level before. Dave Pitt and Barry Cook, again, were both ex-gospel Fareham players, and had managed for a number of years at Loxheath and Andover and Blackfield and Langley. So I asked them if they'd be interested in managing the team, and it was very much because probably I didn't feel confident enough to do it, and I'd seen what had happened to Roger Buckland when he'd done it without too much experience, although there was other issues there. So I got the two of them involved, and what we did between the three of us, we brought people in locally that we knew and trusted, you know, and who wanted to play for gospel. But of course, the other thing that happened is, because I was still playing Sundays and whatever, I ended up normally on the subs bench, but I also ended up playing occasionally. So as the season went on, or as the seasons went on, that more and more Barry and Dave took over, because I don't think it was right that I should be managed and playing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but it was a hard 3 years. We had very, very little money, and of course that meant that, you know, we weren't competing on a level playing field with a number of other sides. And the other thing was, of course, if we brought players through, like Cole List, Ian Rue, people like that, other teams would soon come along and pick them up. So it was very difficult. 2 or 3 years.
Do you regret taking the job? Or do you wish you'd just done it slightly differently?
Probably I was a bit naive in taking it, if I'm honest. I didn't realise how bad things were financially. And of course, you know, again, we had to build a whole team from nothing. All Roger Sherwood's players had gone. So it was difficult. And and what I found was that without being rude about it. Whereas when we were playing in the 70s, as I said earlier, if you didn't train, you didn't play.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's difficult. The level of commitment, possibly again, because there was no finance there. The level of commitment from the players was difficult.
And then, so, yeah, then in 1997, you moved and started managing the reserves team. Was there any particular reason why you took up the reserves team?
Myself and Kevin Blenkinsop would do it. I think Kevin Blenkinsop was the reserve team manager when I was doing the first team.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought I still wanted to be involved with the club.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, that's good. If I take that role, assisting Kevin, and again, I ended up playing, numerous games. So that's how that worked out.
Do you think if you had gone, instead of going from first team to then reserves team, if you went from reserves team to first team, might have worked out a bit differently if you had those 2 years of experience with the reserves team, then went into the first team?
Or do you think it was just because Barry and Dave resigned? I think halfway through the season, and I actually had to take it over again with Dave Taberner.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, I won't say it was an impossible job, but we just didn't have the finances or the backing to be successful. And Dave and Barry are very experienced managers, and in the end they decided to pack it in.
Did you ever at any point ever think about just packing it in for Gosport? It was getting too frustrating with all the problems of players maybe not having the same love and affection for the club. And
on a Friday night you'd be sat at home watching TV or something, and you suddenly get a phone call saying, "Oh, I'm not available tomorrow," and
mm-hmm.
that sort of was, and there's no doubt I got frustrated with it.
Yeah. So then, of course, in 1999, you then took the role of chairman of the club. Was that how did that come about? Because that's a bit of a jump from reserves manager to then essentially running the club.
Well, it wasn't actually. I was still helping the reserves and playing for the reserves,
mm-hmm.
and I think Ian Hay resigned, and again we had an issue where, at the time the club was run by a committee, so I'd been on the committee for about 6 or 7 years. Debbie had been selling raffle tickets on the gate, things
mm-hmm.
like that. And there was the guy that wanted to be chairman. The committee wouldn't have voted him on. And so what we agreed is that I'd stand in as chairman for a year, and then we hoped that we'd be able to change the situation the following year, which is what happened, and I became vice chairman for a number of years. But I was never in a position really to run the club as chairman.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly, didn't have financial position to
mm-hmm.
put money into the club, so it was just really keeping it going.
And then, of course, so you went to vice chairman. How long were you vice chairman for then?
I don't know, 3. I think I packed it in the year that we drew at Tottenham and went up, won the Wessex League again.
Yeah.
And again, I realised then that, and by that time Mark Cook was chairman,
mm-hmm.
that again, it was just financially, I wasn't able to help the club. And also I had a full-time job.
Yeah.
So Mark Hook took over from me as vice chairman for a year or two, and then he became chairman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as you've mentioned, a lot of these roles, as reserves manager, as first team coach, and then as chairman, you had a few roles. So, for example, chairman, you were both doing reserves games and then just being chairman, and then with the first team, you have to fill in players. Do you think that didn't help you try and, because you couldn't give your full time and effort into one thing? Do you think if you had that opportunity where you could just, for example, just focus on coaching or just focus on, helping the background of the club, do you think you would have been able to, a lot more would have been able to be done rather than have to do 2 or 3 jobs?
I don't know. I think if you go back to the original period when we were successful, it was a completely gospel team, completely chairman, secretary, everyone. But obviously, in the latter parts, when we talk about when Alex Pike and Mark, it's a completely different side, and it completely, run more like a professional business, really. No, I don't. And to be honest, even when I was reserve team involved with reserve teams, quite often I played. So you can't beat playing.
Yeah. And so, of course, I've just looked up and found out it was 2007 when 2008 when Gosport won the Wessex League with Alex Pike. Do you think when you left the club at that time, was there also a sense of that the club would now go in the right direction, that instead of now when you've seen it in the big financial problems, of course there were more to come later, but and it was on a downhill. Now with Alex Pike, you're going back up,
Yeah, but I felt that really that there was nothing I could add to the club.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, I wasn't going to put money in myself, and I could see the way it was going. That financially was the biggest issue in there was, and I just couldn't contribute to that. So, I stepped down.
Do you, even though you stepped down, do you think the financial problems, of course, that Goss would have later, do you think those problems weren't ever addressed when you left, and then even going back to Knights, do you think they were never really addressed?
Well, there was certainly it's like your own bank account, isn't it? You don't spend more money than you've got in there. And there was definitely a period when they didn't follow those rules and led to the situation that they were in.
So, obviously you being a board member and seeing also the runnings behind the club, I want to just quickly get your opinion. How do you think Ian McInnes has done since he took over the club? Do you think he's sorted out, I don't know if you know, of course, but do you think he's sorted out problems that when you were there, that you can fix? Do you think he's sorted them, or he's on the path to sorting them out?
Obviously Ian, and I don't know Ian at all, but obviously he's financed the club for the last few years, and very much some of the things they do in the food bank and whatever is tremendous, and I think they're very hard. They're trying very hard to involve Gosport youth teams and Gosport people in the club again. Always worries me when one man, as far as I understand, is putting in all the money. Of course, if he gets fed up or upset about something, then we could be back to where we were. But let's hope that it all works out for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think the chairman has said, he said actually in the Sean Gale interview about his, there has, even though during his time there has been a lack of consistency due to all the financial problems, that his main aim is to, at the end of all of this, this project essentially is to give the club back to the community in the sense where he found a club where it was a community club and give it back to them once he sorted out the problems. Do you think that's important to do, that clubs really get a community club there, like where it was during the late 70s and mid 80s, where it really was that all these gospel boys were playing, everyone knew who they were, I could identify them, and it will almost led to even more success.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult because to sustain a team, in the higher echelons of the non-league game is now very expensive, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be very difficult because gospel, partly because people over here are so fans of Portsmouth.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's going to be very difficult to sustain that, because I don't think gospel will ever get the attendances to sustain that level of football, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm. And so we've talked all about your career. I think I've just got a final few questions before, because to let you go. First would be, how would you want to be remembered as a player?
I don't know, really. It's a bit difficult. I don't know. I don't know. I think my record stands for itself.
Mm-hmm.
To play those number of games when I've spent 5.5 seasons away from the club is quite an achievement. And certainly in those early days when we had that run, and I still get people coming up to me in the high street saying, "Well, you're John Hawes, aren't you?"
Mm-hmm.
I remember, when you were playing, against certain teams. So it's a difficult one to answer, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, really. That's not very helpful, is it?
No. And then the final question, which we ask everyone, is who were your top 3 players you ever played with at Gosport?
Well, first was Tony Mahoney,
mm-hmm.
but I do need to correct Tony on something in a minute, but I'll do that to finish off. Tony Mahoney, for
mm-hmm.
obvious reasons, fantastic captain, fantastic player, really great guy. Gary Jurias, who obviously didn't quite make it at Portsmouth, but was a tremendous player at that level. And I put Graham Wake as my third, because Graham used to, for a guy who drank and smoked as much as he did, how he could run around a football pitch with all the energy and levels that he did, it was incredible. And he made it easy for the rest of us to play. He very rarely gave the ball away, and it was tremendous plan and tremendous. All 3 of those great guys socially.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the bit I want to correct you about.
Mm-hmm.
In Tony Mahoney's thing, he said about the leg.
The leg?
The leg, and how...
yes.
How he done.
I heard about. Yes, he did say, he admitted that he didn't know on the pitch, apparently.
No, I know. Well, that particular game was in the first half, I got elbowed under the chin and all the teeth were smashed together.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent about 10 minutes trying to pick bits of filling out and all the rest of it, teeth. And then in the second half, the same half on the back of the leg, and I fractured the tibia.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just, one. I had smashed in teeth and a fractured tibia. on the Monday, I didn't know whether to go to the dentist or the hospital. And as Tony said, he gave me a real bollocking. And at the time, I thought I was very hard done by, actually. So.
He did admit that in the dressing room you did give him the right reply, though.
Yeah, well, it was pretty exciting. I've got a funny idea. We didn't get a result that day either, so perhaps that always made me a bit tipsy.
Well, tell you what, he did say you did forgive him in the end after that.
Yeah, I think by the end of the night we'd probably made up.
Imagine he had to give you a few beers to make out, though, didn't he?
Yeah, well, as I said on, during that time, our social life, particularly away games, was, with the football team. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Do you think, even though, of course, that instant he got the wrong idea from it, Tony, do you think that sort of instant, though, defined almost the character of that Gosport team, that if someone wasn't working hard, even 1 second a game, that you were dug out, you were like...
Tony even used to moan at training if people weren't, putting 100%. And I wasn't the world's best trainer, but because I worked at places like Salton and Centurion, most days during the week I'd be playing five-a-side with Navy boys or squash or something. So fitness really was never an issue with me. So, but Tony used to get upset in training if things weren't going well.
Right. Well, that's it essentially for the third episode of the Privett Park Legends podcast. I'd like to thank my guest, John Hawes. Have you had a good time, John?
I thoroughly enjoyed it, yeah.
Lovely.
It's always nice talking about yourself, isn't it?
So, again, thank you for listening. Look out for the fourth episode of the Gosport Privett Park Legends podcast. Bye for now.